What's up, guys? Luna Wolf from XS. I wanted to talk about the current state of the UFC. I think the UFC is doing really good. Conor McGregor, when he lost to Khabib, kind of left like a giant hole that the UFC was trying to fill and has not been able to. But what that's created to me is a lot of fighters trying to shoot for that number one spot in the UFC. Conor, whether you love him or hate him, he was the biggest star the UFC's ever had, bigger than Jon Jones. And Jon Jones is a pretty big star when it comes to people not into mixed martial arts knowing who he is. Jon Jones is a pretty big star. Anderson Silva, I would put up there. It's weird, even though you would think George St. Pierre is a pretty big star, because there's people that I know that knew George St. Pierre that didn't watch MMA, and I'm like, wow, how do you know that? He wasn't a huge star, but pretty big star. Conor McGregor rises above all that, especially after he fought Mayweather. But now that Conor has been defeated by Khabib and is there's a big hole. Khabib's not going to fill that gap Conor left, because Khabib's not a talker. I really like Khabib. I like how serious he is about fighting, but I don't like his drive. He doesn't have a whole lot of drive, as in he doesn't care if he's a two-weight champion. He doesn't care if he makes a lot of money, which a lot of people like this about him. He doesn't care if he's a big star like Conor McGregor. He doesn't care. Khabib, I think, would be content with remaining the 155-pound champion for the rest of his career, only having one fight a year or every 2 years. I'm being serious about that. I think Khabib would be okay with having, one fight a year and remaining the 155-pound champion until he retires undefeated. I think he would be okay with that, and I think that would be very boring, and I think once he retired, people would completely forget about him. Conor was not content with doing that. Conor wanted to own every belt in every single class. He wanted to do things that had never been done. He's made like the most money in the UFC. He wants to be a mega star, but still win fights and have crazy fights, as in, I feel like he would move to any weight class if the UFC would allow him to. Whether or not he can win. Because you've got to look at his call-outs. People were like, he's scared of Khabib. He fought Khabib. Yes, he lost, but he fought Khabib. I feel like people hate Conor so much, they're going to, anybody he fights, they're going to be like, oh, he's scared of this guy. Or he'll fight that guy, and then they'll be like, oh, well, you're scared of this guy over here that you've never even heard of. You're scared of him. I don't think Conor's scared of anybody. I don't really think, in a way, I really don't think any MMA fighter, especially in the UFC, is scared of anybody. But I like Conor. I like that he had that drive, still has that drive, I guess, where he wants all the belts, he wants all the money, whereas you don't really have a fighter like that right now. Tyron Woodley is what Khabib is going to become. Tyron's okay with just holding the belt and staying in his weight class, staying in his lane, and making his little money, and then trying to, he's trying his acting career and then get out of the UFC. And it's a smart move for him, but for the fans, it's kind of boring. I think Tyron's going to starch freaking, what's-his-face, Usman. He's going to destroy Usman. I do like Usman's drive right now. He's calling out a lot of fighters. He wants to fight a lot of people, but right now he's got to get past a beast in Tyron Woodley, and I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's going to get beat by Tyron Woodley, and he's going to try and look for a money fight somewhere with Colby Covington or somebody. I like Colby Covington's drive, but you can tell it's an act. With Conor McGregor, it was part act and part serious. He was acting, or still is acting, to make the most money he can, but he was being serious about the call-outs. He wanted these big fights. He didn't care who or where. With Colby Covington, you can tell it's 100% an act. He's just talking big and wearing suits and all that just as an act. I don't think he actually wants to fight a lot of these people. When people call, he talks so much smack. When people call him out in public, like Usman called him out to his face behind the stage at one of the UFC press conferences, and Colby wouldn't even look at him. And then you remember, what's his name? Dadgummit, heavyweight. I can't remember his name right now. He threw a boomerang or something at Colby Covington, and Colby just didn't want any part of it. I feel like it's all an act, and he knows that. And people are calling him out on it. Whereas with Conor McGregor, you didn't see that a whole lot. Conor, there's not a whole lot of footage. You saw the backstage thing with him and Khabib. He wasn't scared of him. And then backstage, Tyrone Woodley even said that Conor bowed up on him. And he was like, man, get out of here. I think Conor thinks that he can beat anybody. A lot of people, and people forgot this, they always called him the long-lost Irish Diaz brother. I feel like the Diaz brothers would fight a grizzly bear if it looked at him wrong. Right now, the Diaz brothers are really pissing me off because there's a lot of people calling them out. And they're just saying, man, I don't want to fight no more. It's like, what are you talking about? I mean, I kind of understand it from their perspective, but I kind of don't at the same time. Nick Diaz could come back right now and fight Anderson Silva. Nick Diaz really could come back right now and fight whoever he wanted to. But Anderson Silva said he would like to do it again, and that's a fight that the fans want to see. And in Brazil, it would be a good retirement fight for Anderson Silva to have a stand-up bout with Nick Diaz. Nate Diaz has had so many... Everybody wants to fight Nate Diaz, but he's just not having it. I don't know what his deal is right now. I don't know what's going on with them. Their stock... It's almost like they're trying to build up their stock in the UFC. Their stock is about to implode. It's so built up right now. People are eventually just going to be like, well, they're never coming back. And then nobody's going to want to see them fight again. But I really like the state of the UFC right now. There's a lot of people... trying to... I like that John Jones has come back, and whether he's clean or not, he's still at least fighting, and he doesn't apparently look to be getting in any trouble. Daniel Cormier, I think, needs to have a fight maybe with Brock Lesnar or something like that, a big name like that. I don't think Daniel Cormier can beat John Jones. I think John Jones is the unsolvable puzzle for Daniel Cormier. Cain Velasquez actually said he thinks he can beat John Jones. And I actually kind of think he can, but at the same time, John Jones, you can't... He just evolves so much, and he's got Greg Jackson at his back, and what's his, Winkle Van John, or whatever the crap is. He's got such a crazy coaching staff behind him that John Jones just keeps evolving, and he's an amazing athlete. He's got two brothers in the NFL, or they were in the NFL. So, I mean, that kind of shows you what kind of, stock he comes from. But, I don't know, the light heavyweights right now are kind of just, whatever, John Jones is going to destroy, I can't even remember that dude's name that he's fighting. He's going to absolutely just walk through that guy. It's not even going to be a fight. I'm not even going to get the pay-per-view unless they have some better fights on there. I like that, what's his name from, I'm using a lot of what's his names. I'm going to try and find him. God, what is his name? Everybody's talking about Cain Velasquez right now. Cain Velasquez is going to destroy Francis Ngannou or whatever. He's going to absolutely destroy him. Ben Askren was who I was trying to... Ben Askren, I love that Ben Askren has come to the UFC. I think he is going to be a very hard problem for people to solve. He is basically a larger Khabib in that he can put people on the mat whenever he wants and just hold them there and smother them, and they can't do anything about it. And that's kind of the way Khabib is. I do feel like Khabib and... they look unbeatable right now, Khabib and Ben Askren. They look unbeatable, but I feel like they're beatable. They basically have the same game plan. They're just so high level. They're such high level wrestlers that people can't execute their game plan towards them. But I do feel like somebody with the mindset like John Jones could come along and just end their careers. John Jones is just so good at everything. He doesn't have to. If Ben Askren fought John Jones, Ben Askren would want to go to the mat, and John Jones would know that. So John Jones would just keep him off of him and kick his face and spinning back elbow his face into oblivion. I feel like somebody's going to come along and end Khabib that way and Ben Askren. Even though I like both of them, and I'm so glad Ben Askren come to the UFC, but I feel like they're semi one-dimensional, and I feel like they can be beat. I was trying to think what else. I kind of hope, I really do, I don't want Daniel Cormier to fight Jon Jones for a third time because of his legacy. I feel like Daniel Cormier has come out on top in the Jon Jones fights because Jon Jones popped for cocaine once, I think, and then popped for steroids. So I feel like Daniel Cormier can just wipe that away and be like, I'm done trying to fight Jon Jones. He's a cheater. I'm done with him. And I feel like he can fight Brock Lesnar, and he would beat Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is not, I mean, you're talking about a guy who came to the game very late in an old age. Brock Lesnar had a wrestling background but hadn't done it in forever, and came in the UFC, and because of his size and his athleticism, destroyed people. But when he met high-level wrestlers like Cain Velasquez, he just couldn't do it. He couldn't out-wrestle those guys. They're so good at messing up big guys, bigger than them. Daniel Cormier is going to do the same thing to Brock Lesnar. He's just going to take him to the ground and beat him up, and Brock Lesnar's probably going to tap or something. Because Brock Lesnar he's got a career. He's good. He doesn't really need to win. He doesn't need another belt, you know. So I feel like Brock would probably just stop, like quit in that fight. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean like he would just. I don't feel like, whatever. You know what I'm saying. I don't know. Daniel Cormier needs that last big win, and I think he could get it against maybe Francis. Maybe a rematch with Stipe, but I think it would be his biggest bang for his buck would be Brock Lesnar, and then he retires. And just people if they ask him about Jon Jones, he'll just be like, you know, he's a cheater. But Jon Jones, on the other hand, is just going to continue to dismantle people. I don't think anybody's ever going to beat him. I mean, I guess it's the same way with Anderson. I thought nobody was ever going to beat Anderson, but eventually he started losing. That Anderson Adesanya Israel fight was awesome. A lot of people said it was overrated. A lot of people said it was boring. I thought it was awesome because for 3 rounds, I wish it was a 5-round fight, but for 3 rounds, I was sitting there like, my God, one of these guys is about to knock the other one out. I mean, it could just happen like that. Anderson, his age showed. He looked old. He looked slow, but there was still sparks of brilliance. It was almost like Bo Jackson, if you know who that is. He was voted one of the greatest athletes of all time by ESPN or something. Bo Jackson, after he broke his hip and came back to the sport, he wasn't the same. He wasn't as good, but there were still these moments of just insane brilliance that would happen, and you'd be like, oh, there's Bo Jackson. That's the way it was with Anderson Silva in that Israel fight. Israel's faster, younger, better, and Anderson Silva still had those moments where you're like, oh my God, that's Anderson Silva. That's the Anderson I remember. So it was great. That was a fans, an old school UFC fans fight. Watching Anderson Silva stand up with this young elite striker. A lot of people are saying Israel's overrated. He had I can't remember how many kickboxing fights he had, but it was something like up in the 70s kickboxing fights, and then he almost had as many knockouts kickboxing, like 70 knockouts, something crazy like that. And then before that, he had his amateur was like 115 or something, and he had a bunch of knockouts in that. It's like, this dude is a knockout artist. People were saying he was overrated. But I mean, you got to think he's standing up fighting with his idol, Anderson Silva, a man who is still very dangerous. A lot of people think Anderson's not dangerous anymore. I'm telling you, go ride down to Brazil and ask to spar Anderson Silva if you don't think he's still dangerous. He's still extremely dangerous, but there's a lot of holes in his games now, in his game, and he's old. But I'm really excited with where. I like that Conor McGregor kind of started the crossover fights where you would go to a different weight class for a one-fight-only type deal. I'm liking that that's happening in the UFC right now. A lot of people are dropping weight, gaining weight. we're getting to see some of the greatest matchups possible right now in the UFC, and it's all thanks to Conor. I even said that after Conor goes, the UFC is going to have a huge hole to fill, and there are a lot of fighters. I'm surprised. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought the UFC was just going to tank. But there are a lot of fighters filling that role that Conor McGregor left open. But it makes me mad that possibly 2 of the greatest fighters in the UFC right now, 3 actually in the UFC, aren't going to cross over. John Jones, I don't think he's going to move up to heavyweight. I wish he would. I think he's just going to stay in light heavyweight and beat nobodies for the rest of his life. Khabib, same way. I think he's just going to stay in 155 and just beat nobodies for the rest of his life. Same thing with Woodley. I think Tyron Woodley's just going to stay at 170 and beat a bunch of nobodies and just, waltz out into the sunset. Those 3 fighters are going to be the most boring fighters in the UFC right now, as far as things outside of the ring, as in like moving to different weight classes, talking a bunch of smack. That's why I'm glad Ben Askren's here to take over, because I think he really will take over, and I think he's entertaining. He can get under people's skin, but a lot of people are stepping up in the wake of Conor McGregor losing his last fight and kind of disappearing from the UFC, but apparently he's coming back and he's going to fight Donald Cerrone. I think Donald Cerrone is going to kill Conor McGregor, but still going to watch that fight anyways, though. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Who's your favorite fighter right now? And if I don't know who they are, what's that other guy that's from Dagestani or whatever? The real skinny dude with the beard. He looks like a smaller Khabib. I can't remember his name, but that dude is insane. I can't wait to watch that dude fight again. I wish I'd have talked about him earlier, but I can't remember his name, but he is insane right now. Apparently they're saying he's going to be one of the best to ever do it, and I really want to watch that. But anyways, appreciate y'all watching. Check me out, SoundCloud, Instagram, Twitter. Check me out. I forgot what else I was supposed to say. Check me out on the streets.